We're in very, very distinguished company. To my colleagues in government, to our colleagues in the great ongoing project of ensuring that all of the children of New York have the opportunity to a great education. Hugo Morales, my other colleagues from CUNY. This is a great program, started back in 1997, distinguished alumni, and the idea is that democracy is not a spectator sport. We find this phenomenon a lot. People in the United States think, well, maybe if I vote, that's it. Then I can just wait for the people in the government to do their job. That's not the way the system works. It's like everything else in life. You get out of it what you put into it. And in the Senate, you're going to have the opportunity today to experience a critical part of this. There is something wonderful and sort of magical about the democratic process because it's not a market and it's not a meritocracy. People can vote for a person, people can vote for a bill, for any reason they want. People can vote, sometimes people vote against you because I remind them of their fifth grade teacher and they didn't like their fifth grade teacher. On the other hand, sometimes I remind them of a teacher they did like. The process in the legislature is similar. You get up, you debate, people have all sorts of different interests. I know you're going to be talking about some interesting subjects today. Sometimes it's very personal. Sometimes it relates very closely to your district, to the place you come from and the interests of those people. Sometimes it has to do with your broader view, your vision for America, what should happen. But the genius of the United States is that we have a representative democracy that is done better than any in the history of the world, based on a simple idea. We have a market economy where all of you are invited to work as hard as you can to get as rich as you can. But we have an electoral democracy in which every person's vote counts the same. The poorest person's vote and the most blue-blooded billionaire have the same power in the voting booth. And when you get elected to the legislature, your power, your vote is equal to every other member of the Senate, every other member of the Assembly. So welcome to the House of Democracy. Welcome to your house. Now, the Senate, as you can see, in an earlier era, an earlier, less democratic era, frankly, because the laws when this building were built, it was much more of a plutocracy, much more of an aristocratic tinge to things. You can see they sort of modeled it on that theme. But believe me, when you're here working day in, day out, you forget about the beauty of the chamber and you focus on the tasks at hand. Here is where we decide how much money goes to poor school districts. Here's where we decide how many police there are on the streets. Here's where we decide what our civil rights laws are, how immigrants will be treated. Here is where we decide whether every child has access to a great education through great CUNY and SUNY systems or not. So you are here now to participate in the genius of America. Please enjoy it and come back. You can come back as a senator or you can come back as a lobbyist, as an activist, as a citizen, to tell your representatives what you want them to do. The more you do, the more you get. There's a fundamental rule of politics, and it's true for me and all of my colleagues and every elected official. We get from our elected officials what we make them give us. If you don't speak up, if you don't write in, if you don't stand up for what you believe and let people know, then you're not going to get everything we can get from this amazing system. So welcome to the Senate, welcome to your house. To my colleagues, I thank you. It's great to be back here. This is the first time I've been back actually since I left service in the Senate. So a tribute to the persuasiveness of Senator Rivera. But it's also that I've loved this program from its inception. I'm very, very honored to be a part of it. Welcome, thank you, come back often. Thank you very much.
I also want to quickly acknowledge we have another state senator with us, State Senator Malcolm Smith from Queens. just waiting on the gavel.
This is the honorary Edward T. Rogalski Gavel. I just want to, again, take a point of personal privilege. And as I remarked to you last week, and just celebrate the fact that 1 week ago, we celebrated the 10th year anniversary of the CUNY internship program being renamed for Professor Edward T. Rogalski. So it's just, again, in memoriam. The 2011 Model New York State Senate session shall come to order. Our Model Senate clerks are Professor Jill Gross and Professor Ricardo Gabriel. Would you please join us? As well as clerks Santana and Ruiz. Would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? And in the spirit of bipartisanship, we've asked Senator Jack Martins from the Majority Conference, who represents Nassau County, to lead us in today's pledge. So would you please join us at the dais?
Please join me. Hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
I'm sorry, please remain standing. Our newly minted Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, you heard about him a little bit in more detail during our luncheon, is Frank Sanchez, who has generously agreed to deliver this afternoon's invocation. So without further ado, Vice Chancellor Sanchez.
Thank you and good evening. Please join me just for a moment of reflection and thanks and prayer. Our God, in every community across the globe, your people have gathered throughout history to honor your lordship. We give thanks for life and all that sustains it and the many blessings you have bestowed upon us. We thank you for the freedom and this particular opportunity to meet together, to share our beliefs and worship you. On this day, we especially thank you for our companions, staff, students, faculty, and administrators, the legislators, trustees, and university officials all assembled here on this most auspicious occasion, the 2011 Somos El Futuro Conference. We've been uniquely gifted by you with energy and strength, intelligence, imagination, and love. May our unity as we learn, teach, and relate to one another bring honor to your name. Please guide us as we seek to be mindful of those most in need, those weighted by poverty and injustice and oppression. Help us to lead lives of compassion and service, and to see your spirit in the faces of those that we serve. Above all, please help us to live lives of wisdom, of hope, of courage, and abundant faith, so that we may demonstrate sound leadership on behalf of this community and the entire world in praise of your great works. All this we pray for in the name of our shared humanity. Amen.
Please be seated. Chair requests the privilege of recognizing the Assembly member from the Bronx and a very, very good friend to all of us, Assemblywoman Vanessa Gibson. You have heard our speakers this afternoon project their voice for the entire chamber. We would like you to follow in their example as we are working without amplification this afternoon. The Model Senate has given you voice. It is time to use it. The chair recognizes Majority Leader Colon, District 9.
I call up Model Senate Bill 15 and ask the clerk to read it.
Proposes a constitutional amendment to create a nonpartisan 5-member apportionment commission, 4 members of which shall be appointed by the majority and minority officers of the legislature, and the 5th to be selected by the aforesaid 4. To create new legislative districts requires districts to be as compact as possible. Set standards for establishment of legislative districts.
Thank you, Clerk Applewhite. The Model Senate will now proceed to debate on Model Senate 15. The chair recognizes the senator from District 45, Senator Marrero.
Senator Marrero, District 45. Good afternoon, honorable senators and distinguished guests. Having an independent redistricting commission redraw the new district lines is the best options for our constituents, which is why I vote in favor for the bill MS-15. We are taking away the redistricting authority from the hands of legislators and putting it back in the hands of our constituents. This is about the people choosing their leaders, not the legislators choosing their voters. Considering that the New York State Census results are doubtful and that we may have to go back to the drawing board is only one part of this time-consuming process that must be taken on a case-by-case basis. With that in mind, if we redo the census and recount our numbers, we still have to decide who will effectively represent our constituents in the committee. That is why the Democratic Party proposition is careless, in that this is not our last breath. How can we trust a party who has 2 different bills proposed on the floor? This is proof of a divided front and a weak foundation. Their proposition does not look out for the best interests for our constituents, because it is not fully independent and it would continue to grant one political party the upper hand, insofar as who gets to be a part of the commission. Honorable senators, we cannot rush this. It is simply too soon, and it is our duty to look out for the best interests of our constituents. If MS-15 is not passed, we run the risk of giving too much redistricting power to the governor. It is imperative this becomes an amendment to our Constitution, as this is the only way we can guarantee our constituents will be adequately represented in the future. I will not let my district down. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Marrero. Senator from District 13, Senator Carter.
Good afternoon, Senator Carter, District 13. For this bill, we should focus not on the emotion involved, but on the facts presented before us. And the facts here state that our system is overwhelmingly flawed. These districts were created to provide a unified voice to the communities that they represent, yet somewhere along the way, the opposing side has lost sight of that. This bill is merely an attempt by the opposing side to give the impression that they are dealing with the matter at hand, and I assure you that that is not the case. New York State's population is overwhelmingly Democratic by a 3-to-1 ratio, yet most of us in here are Republican. That fact in itself is a direct representation of gerrymandering and why you should say no to this bill. This bill, now, if your population is accurately represented, not only will you see a change in this chamber, but you will see a change in this state. This bill is proposing a 10-year wait before anything substantial is done. And I urge all of the members here to think just how much can happen during a 10-year span. We have the means to start this redistricting process now, as well as the recent census numbers to guide the mapping process. Act now. The only way to truly affect the future is to be active in the present. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Carter. Chair recognizes, order. Chair recognizes the senator from District 22, Senator Foster.
Senator Foster from District 22. Good afternoon, fellow senators and special guests. It is a pleasure being before you today. As members of the New York State Senate, we are dealing with a major issue of redistricting that has been constantly debated. The Constitution of New York State has been amended over the course of the years to create a far more fair and functional government for all New Yorkers. Redistricting is an issue that affects the integrity and the efficiency of our government and can only be approached by amending the Constitution. As a democracy, we deem to follow and preserve the constituents whom we represent by their vote. Now we, Republicans, have political power over the New York Senate, and some of our colleagues feel the need to regain power. Some senators are very cynical because they even calculate that the Senate will become more democratic. As senators, we hold each other accountable, and my opponents have been able to gain power under the current system. Therefore, the argument that legislative redistricting favors my party is invalid. There isn't a need to rush. Governor Cuomo sees the need to pass the independent redistricting legislation, and even though it sounds flowery and great, this is just an attempt to concentrate more power on the executive branch, which violates our principles of checks and balances. So I repeat, what is the rush? The just and right thing is to take the necessary steps that will constitute change for the people that we, my colleagues, thoroughly represent. Politics aside, let us move ahead with the bill MS-15. An amendment to the Constitution will be the essence of a democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Foster. Chair recognizes the senator from District 21, Senator Sowell.
Thank you, Chair. Senator Sowell, District 21. The issue we have faced here is not to debate whether this bill, MS-15, is good or not, but rather we are faced with a debate which concerns the democracy and the future of our state. Democrats and Republicans both share in the same principle that there should be a fair way to draw congressional and legislative lines. That is why 60 of us signed the New York Uprising Pledge, which called for the establishment of an independent redistricting commission. This bill, although it has provisions for the creation of a nonpartisan redistricting commission, tends to start the process for over a decade. A clear breach and betrayal of the pledges we made to the people of this state who are calling for fair redistricting now. We live in a state where the majority of its citizens have lost faith, confidence, and trust in the state legislature. Why? Because the last three redistricting cycles have proven to show that the legislature has succeeded in taking away the mandates of the people when it comes to the election of representatives. What kind of democracy are we practicing when we literally cut and paste districts and communities for our own political gains? Again, there is no guarantee that this bill will serve its purpose. Now is the time to restore faith and confidence in New Yorkers. Now is the time to restore honor, dignity, and respect to our state legislature. Now is the time for New Yorkers to have fair share and fair and equal representation. Now, not 10 years, and definitely not tomorrow. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the senator from District 51, Senator Quintero Williams.
Good afternoon, my fellow senators and guests. I believe that we should follow the dictates of principle, not politics. It is therefore that I vote in favor of Bill MS-15, because you and I, all senators present in this room, are working towards making vital change in the legislative and governance process. We must be so dedicated to achieving this goal that we must put our individual agendas to the side. The MS-15 bill specifically states the members of the Independent Redistricting Commission shall reflect the diversity of residents of this state with regard to race, ethnicity, gender, and geographic residence. The welfare and the voice of the people should not be drawn out by the fate of a line. This is why I believe that an independent redistricting commission should be in charge of the needs of the people, taken out of the hands of the politicians, and supported through the Constitution. Making a decisive change to the redistricting process is vital to the health of our state. In my senatorial district, 51, located in the heart of New York, the highest level of education that young people receive is high school. The future of families, communities, and people who are trying to make a better life for themselves is more important to me than the number of voters who come out on election day. For them, higher education, college, is a secondary option or a pipe dream. The success awaiting our young constituents is a driving force for examining the ideas presented in this bill. It is our obligation to be more concerned with the needs of the people instead of the majority of the vote. Let the people speak for themselves. Don't you agree that we need to make change in order to truly make a difference in the lives of our constituents, regardless of their political background? Is it about politics or the needs of the people? Why make politics a power struggle? Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the senator from District 36, Senator Papas.
Good afternoon. As elected officials, it is our duty to represent the people who vote us into public office, now, not 10 years from now. Why? Because justice delayed is justice denied. I ask you, how can equal representation take place in this decade if we do not count the 2010 census? It is up to us to create a fair and just legislature, and by waiting an additional 10 years, we are not living up to our constituents' expectations. Justice delayed is justice denied. In my district, District 36, there are schools that depend on the money they would receive if district lines were drawn based on the current demographics. They cannot wait another 10 years. Justice delayed is justice denied. Children are failing classes not because of their lack of ability, but because of the stress and the limited number of resources provided to them. It is imperative for the children of my district to be represented and the issues addressed. And this can only be done by redistricting now and properly allocating state funding. Justice delayed is justice denied. We must vote no for this bill. Now is not the time to change the Constitution. Now is the time to take care of the people here and now in 2011. I urge each and every one of you to vote no for this bill. No more delays. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the senator from District 42, Senator Suazo.
Fellow senators, we, as legislators, have here an opportunity to create a better government for the people of the state of New York. We have the opportunity to permanently remove politics from one of the most corrupt forms of government practice, district reapportionment. The bill my party and I are endorsing will permanently remove the practice of gerrymandering in New York. The Democratic leadership will make this an issue of politics, but we must make it clear that this is a case of creating better government and putting partisan bickering to the side. Opponents of this bill do not offer us a better counter solution, but desire to rush a mediocre legislation that could put our voters at the risk of gerrymandering in a future day. Our bill, however, will give us an opportunity to do away with hasty decision-making and allow us to amend our Constitution in a way that could create an independent committee that would draw our district lines in the most ideal form, free of corruption and partisan politics. Let us not become victims to sensationalistic politics that would produce a bill legislation that would just be a quick fix attempt to such a sensitive issue as this one. It would be hasty and narrow-minded to rush our way into this issue instead of taking our time and creating a constitutional amendment that would ultimately serve the interest of the people. This bill will be the correct path towards permanently defeating gerrymandering in New York. The alternative bill by the Democratic leadership is unconstitutional because district reapportionment by legislation still stands today according to our Constitution. This bill is a proposition for constitutional amendment, which is the correct way to solve this issue. The Democratic leadership, along with the governor, want to be above the Constitution, and we must not allow this because this will set the precedent. This will set the precedent where the essence of our democracy will be violated by any group possessing power. I urge you to vote for the correct government. I urge you to vote for the correct government proposal. Vote for MS 15. This is in our interest as just lawmakers and democratically elected officials to do what is best for the people of the state of New York. Thank you.
The chair recognizes the senator from District 31, Senator Melendez.
Senator Mary Beth Melendez, District 31. My fellow senators, I emphatically vote no on this bill. Now, I'm not going to stand here and give you a speech or a written script, because we don't do that in District 31. I'm just going to tell you straight like it is, and right from the preamble of our Constitution. The first line says, "We, the people, in order to form a most perfect union." Now, I'll give you Exhibit A. District 49. Exhibit B. District 27. And Exhibit C. District 22. Now, my fellow senators, I know I'm blind, but I know you're not. Does this look like a fair unity? Does this look perfect to you? This is what we're debating here. This is what's at stake. This is gerrymandering, and this needs to stop. These lines have consequences. There are real people behind these lines. This only exacerbates an issue that we already have in this state of New York, and that is social economic strife and stratification. It has consequences that trickles down to every community, every neighborhood, every neighbor. In my district, in your district, in 22 and 13 and 17, all of us sitting here, right in here, in this great state of New York. Now, we need to do something about it now. We already followed our Constitution. Our amendment of 14th Amendment states everyone needs to be accounted for. The 2010 census already accounted them. Now, in the 2008 election, you heard about Joe the plumber. Well, guess what? He lives in my district. And his wife's name is Ana Maria. And their two kids were born in Columbia Presbyterian Hospital, right in District 31. And as they take their kids to the HIP center, that is highly an area where people use Medicaid, that's where gerrymandering steps in and cuts those economic dollars that come right to our community. Am I supposed to turn around and tell them, Senator Foster, to wait until their daughters are 12, 14, and 16 years old that they can then move forward? I say no. I say no, and we have a responsibility to serve the people of our district now. This bill does not fit the bill of New York, so then we four create one that does. So in closing, let us follow the words of our very famous Republican First Lady Nancy Reagan, just say no.
Senator Moreno.
Good afternoon, honorable senators, esteemed guests. I support the bill MS-15 because it takes a firm and honest step towards reform in Albany through the law of the land, the New York State Constitution, our land. The New York State Constitution will provide, this amendment will provide a permanent solution in that temporary rush experiment. We owe our constituents an ethical reform composed of good government and politics for the people and by the people. However, Senator Carter, reform is not fully achieved through redistricting exclusively. Other things still need to be addressed. Things like financing campaigns, lobbying, and special interest groups. Our bill, MS-15, may not be effective in 2012. The reason why? Because our Constitution stipulates rules. As the law of the land, we follow it. The beauty of the Democratic Party's argument for time is that it's actually the essence of our democracy. Change doesn't happen overnight in a real democratic country. It is a real democracy that takes time to debate legislation as serious as redistricting. This is why our democracy is widely admired and followed worldwide. Through the bill MS-15, the Republicans' rights would end where the Democrats' rights start. The alternative bill violates the separation of power, they're disorganized, and are not truly independent. This is why I urge you all, who truly want reform in Albany, to vote yes for Bill MS-15, together across party lines. We can start today a series of reforms that will provide our constituents with good government and true representation, permanently, not temporarily. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Moreno. Chair recognizes the Senator from District 12, Senator Watson.
Good afternoon. My name is Senator Terrell Watson, and I served as the draftsperson for the bill that opposed MS-15. And my bill didn't make it to the floor, and that's understood. That's the risk you run into being in the minority, right? However, there are some major disadvantages to MS-15 that the bill that I proposed would have fixed. There are two in particular. One, MS-15 lacks the necessary specificity to have redistricting reform take place as efficiently as necessary. For example, MS-15 is currently silent with regards to how the population deviation statistic would affect the Senate districts that we represent here in the state. It only mentions the fact that the federal congressional district would be lowered from 5% deviation allowance to 1%. So do we want to continue to have possible deviations that go from 9.5% to 10% between the smallest and the largest districts? I think not. my bill would allow for all Senate districts within the state and federally to have a deviation lower than 5, as low as 1. Second, the bill that I proposed garners much more independence. The bill currently on the floor allows for a redistricting commission to be made up of 5 appointees from the respective parties of the Assembly and the Senate. The bill that I have proposed allows for an independent nominations committee to be made. And from that nominations committee, 40 are chosen to serve in a nominations pool, thus making the process even more independent, more effective, and more bipartisan. So I ask you here today to vote nay. And please take note, a nay vote is not a vote against independent redistricting reform. No doubt we all agree that reform needs to take place. However, a nay vote is a vote against inefficiency, a vote against sluggish behavior by the opposing party. I ask you here today to vote nay and allow for a more efficient bill that allows for a more speedy process to have independent redistricting reform. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the senator from District 19, Senator Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, we're all here because we represent the people of the great state of New York. This is not a contest of partisanship. This is not a contest of who is over another person. This is a contest of reform. 60 of us 62 representatives before us signed a pledge when we took office. And this pledge is for reform, not in 2023, now. We need reform now. A Republican defeat is not a defeat, but it is a bipartisan handshake to give us the opportunity to make an even better constitutional amendment. We can all agree